Ahir, Guardian of Malor, Chapter 15. The battle begins. Arya's Avum all around the room watched a figure sitting in the middle on top of a throne that was made from delicate strips of gold designed to look like vines growing upward and wrapping around themselves. The Arya's Avum seated on the throne had his eyes closed in concentration, and sweat was beading upon his forehead. He was draped in purple robes with golden trim, and a tall, gold-colored hat sat upon his head. The top was folded backward, leaving 4 inches of fabric hanging loosely. Several of the other Arya's Avum sat around glowing blue spheres, which showed a black figure marching toward the palace they occupied. Smiles filled every face, and many were drinking a black liquid from thin, tall silver containers. Whispers filled the room, excitedly saying that the day they had been waiting for was nearly upon them, that the hour of their victory was finally here. The doors burst open and every head turned and witnessed a black mist creature escorted by a grinning Arya's Avum draped in a red robe and clutching a sheathed sword. The room erupted into a mix of wild cheers, sneers, and laughter.
"Not so tough now, are you, hero? You won't be hurting any more of Master Lane Khan's loyal followers now, will you, Ahir?"
The black mists glided along without looking up or acknowledging any of their shouts. A grinning Arya's Avum handed a key to the Arya's Avum holding the sword. He used it to unlock the door of the cage and opened it. The black mist glided into an intricately crafted cage of iron. The bars looked like delicate vines covered in thorns with lifelike flower blossoms at the tops. The Arya's Avum carrying the sword swung the door shut behind the black mist, and the door locked into place with a click. The demeanor of the mist creature changed once the door clicked shut. "Where am I? Why do I look like this? What's going on?" The Arya's Avum that had escorted him leered into the cage.
"What's the matter, Ahir? Aren't you enjoying your new home?"
The mist creature turned and looked at the Arya's Avum that had spoken, and hesitantly said, "Torjad, is that you? What's going on?" A weak voice responded from further in the cage.
"He's been manipulating us from the very beginning, Ahir. He ever was and ever will be Lane Khan's creature."
Ahir turned and concern filled his face when he recognized Barbo's voice. He hovered over the bruised and battered form of Barbo. "Barbo, what have they done to you?" A grin covered Torjad's face.
"Don't worry about him. He can't be killed, remember? Well, not yet anyway. I'd be much more worried about what we're about to do to you."
Fear filled Ahir's face, but before he could respond, a regal voice called out, "Torjad, you have kept me waiting long enough. Bring the sword to me." Torjad's face crumpled up in anger, but it quickly changed to a winning smile. He turned and started walking toward the figure seated upon the golden throne.
"Of course. Here is the artifact you have been waiting for, Master."
Torjad held the hilt of the sword out to Lane Khan. A smile filled Lane Khan's face, and he pulled the blade free of his sheath. He gazed at the blade, marveling in its craftsmanship. He swung the sword down onto Torjad's wrist. Torjad jumped back in pain, clutching his hurt, but intact, wrist. He looked at Lane Khan with confusion. Lane Khan shook his head. "I had to know for certain if they had actually sealed the blade to that human or not." Torjad glared at Lane Khan.
"What if they hadn't sealed it? You were going to cut off my hand."
Lane Khan smiled. "Relax, Torjad. There's a reason why I went for your wrist and not your throat. If it had worked, your hand could have been healed." Lane Khan set the sword on his lap, closed his eyes, and held his hands over the blade. After a short time, he frowned and opened his eyes back up. "This seal that they put on the sword is a real bother. Legaz, Yuntu, and Wumtan, come and aid me in the breaking of this seal." He fixed his gaze upon Torjad. "This is going to take some time to break the seal. While I'm distracted by this, do what you can to keep our enemies busy, my trusted advisor." A smile filled Torjad's face. He bowed to Lane Khan.
"It will be as you say, Master."
Torjad turned and made his way out of the room. He spared Ahir and Barbo a smirk as he walked past them, and all the other Arya's Avum in the room followed him out. Once they were in a circular chamber outside of Lane Khan's throne room, Torjad turned and faced the group that had followed him out.
"Master Lane Khan wants us to create more distractions for Darduo, so we are going to capture more humans. I want 6 of you to work on opening portals around Malor, and I want the rest of you to go through and grab as many humans as you can." One of the Arya's Avum looked at Torjad and frowned.
"What of the human with the bow? Won't he simply send us back like last time?"
Torjad laughed.
"How do you think he'll be able to find you? Without me there telling him where to go, he won't know you were ever there."
The Arya's Avum that had spoken glared up at Torjad.
I can't believe that Master Lane Khan accepted you back after you worked so hard to foil his plans. You have any idea how many of us were sent back empty-handed because of you?
Torjad leered back.
Master Lane Khan sent me over to that place with a mission, and I was successful. The sword is in his possession, and there are none that will be able to stand against him. That is why I am Lane Khan's advisor, and you are simply his pawns, and you had best not forget your place. Get those portals open now.
The Arius Avum glared at Torjad, but they turned to begin their preparations for his plans, and a smile filled Torjad's face. He loved the feeling of having that kind of power. He would never have the absolute power that Lane Khan wielded, but as long as he stayed as Lane Khan's advisor, he could make him dance like his little puppet king, even though it would be Lane Khan they bowed to. It would be Torjad's vision they would be living. Torjad moved toward the staircase and started climbing up for the top of the tower, and he mused to himself as he did. He thought that his life was over when Darduo sent Lane Khan to replace him as the governor of the Nathair province. After all the work he did for his province, and indirectly for the kingdom, he was replaced by a youth who didn't know the first thing about ruling. Once he noticed that Lane Khan took his every advisement to heart, it wasn't difficult at all to turn him against his father. Subtly, of course. It would not have been wise to come out and plainly say to dethrone his father. No, once Torjad had finished with Lane Khan, he thought that it was his own idea to turn on his father. It only took a gentle nudge here and there for him to start thinking of it on his own. Torjad may no longer be a governor, but he would soon be the ruler of this entire world, if indirectly. Torjad opened the door at the top of the staircase and walked to the edge of the tower. He gazed over the city spread out beneath him and the lights of the other cities in the distance. Soon, all of this would belong to Lane Khan, which meant that it would dance to his tune. Perhaps in a millennia or two, once things calmed down and settled into normality, Torjad would take up the sword and do away with Lane Khan. Then he would be able to step out of the shadows and take his rightful place. Torjad threw his head back and laughed. Ahir and the others thought that Lane Khan was the one they had to worry about, but they had had their true enemy in their midst the entire time. Trixie adjusted her helmet as they walked down the hallway behind the Arius Avum that was leading them to where the king was giving his speech. She looked at Milton, who was walking beside her.
Do you think there will be many volunteers?
Milton shrugged. The Arius Avum we have met so far seem to respect and follow everything their king asks of them, but he is asking them for something that goes against who they are. I'm not sure what to expect. The servant led them out the door at the end of the hall onto a balcony overlooking the courtyard down below. Trixie held her hand up to shade her eyes from the harsh light from the 4 lights hanging in the sky. She squinted and turned to the servant in surprise.
Your world has 4 suns?
The servant smiled and shook his head.
No, we have 6. But 4 is the most that you will see in the sky at once. Wait here, and His Majesty will see to you once he is done giving his speech.
The servant bowed his head and walked back into the hallway. Milton shook his head. 6 suns? I don't know that I could ever get used to something like that. If it's always bright out, when do people sleep? Trixie shrugged.
Maybe they don't sleep. The Arius Avum are pretty different from us.
She motioned for Milton to follow her.
Come on, let's go listen to the end of the king's speech.
Trixie and Milton made their way closer to where King Darduo was addressing his people. Darduo gripped the stone guardrail tightly.
This is our problem, and we cannot just rely on others to solve it for us. We have to do our part to ensure our freedom and safety. Who will join with our human allies and fight to keep our family safe?
Rousing cheers came up from the Arius Avum gathered down below, and tears formed in the king's eyes.
Thank you all for your support. Those that are interested in aiding in our plan, please make your way to Las Crit's armory. You'll be directed on where to go after that.
King Darduo turned to face Milton and Trixie.
I see you have already finished with Las Crit. I trust that he has provided you with some of his finest work.
Trixie nodded her head.
He certainly has. He had the perfect artifacts to complement the ones we already have.
Trixie pulled her helmet off and smiled at it. She placed it back on her head and turned her attention back on Darduo.
We only caught the end of it, but that seemed to be a very powerful speech, Your Majesty. Your people certainly seem to be excited by it.
Darduo smiled and nodded his head.
Yes, fortunately your plan was well received. It seems you will have many volunteers to help you in the upcoming fight.
Milton nodded his head appreciatively. Good. The more that join with us, the less likely we are to be focused upon. We need to move against Lane Khan soon, though. The longer we give him before we attack, the more likely it will be that he'll be able to use the sword when we face him. The king sighed.
I wish it was not so. I would trade anything to give my people more time to prepare for this. Or, better yet, to avoid this altogether. If only we could come to a peaceful resolution.
Trixie looked sympathetically at the king.
I'm sure you have done everything that you can to solve this peacefully. Unfortunately, some people just can't be reasoned with, and no matter what, someone is going to get hurt. The only thing you can do then is to try and make it so as few people get hurt as possible.
Milton nodded his head. In order for us to ensure the safety of your people, we have to move as soon as they are ready to go. Where are we supposed to meet them?
They will gather at the front gate of the castle once they have been given some equipment by Las Crit. I will have 2 Enivos sent there to take you all to the Nathair province. That's where Lane Khan's palace is located. Come, I will take you there now, and we can wait for the others to arrive.
The king led Trixie and Milton through the palace to the front gates. Along the way, Milton asked, "What are Enivos?"
They are some of the fastest vehicles our scientists have developed, except for those we use to visit other worlds. I think you will be quite impressed by them.
A servant pushed open the front door of the castle and bowed to the king. Milton and Trixie gazed in wonder at the sights that awaited them. Plants that looked similar to grass grew on either side of the path that led up to the palace, but they were a mosaic of colors that looked like they were allowed to grow randomly. But if seen from above, it became clear that they were arranged by a master artist to form a beautiful lakeside scene. Shrubs and tall trees grew amongst the grass at perfect spots to add to the scenery, and some of the grass was even arranged to appear to be reflections of the trees on the water. They were nothing compared to the gates, however, which were made of some sparkling metal that caused the light of the suns to dance along them. The gates, which were always open, were made up of a series of connected metal plates, each formed into a different creature. The upper part of the gate was comprised of different winged creatures. Most looked like birds, but some of them were clearly not birds. Below them were all sorts of creatures that would run along the ground, some with 2 legs, others with 4, and even a few with more. One side of the gate looked like it was made to resemble the ground with all sorts of burrowing creatures scattered throughout, and the other side looked as if it had flowing waves on it, and featured all sorts of aquatic creatures. Milton and Trixie stared in wonder at the surroundings until 2 clouds dropped from the sky to the path. The sides opened to reveal that they weren't actually clouds, but rather vehicles that had been fashioned to look like clouds. The 2 Arias Avum stepped out of the vehicles and knelt before King Darduo.
Your Majesty, we have prepared the vehicles you requested. We can leave whenever you give the order.
Darduo nodded his head.
Very good. I will entrust these 2 into your care. If you will excuse me, I have some other things to attend to.
Darduo walked back into the palace, past the first group of Arias Avum, carrying artifacts with them. Each Arias Avum introduced themselves to Trixie and Milton before they climbed into one of the Enivos. Once the last Enivo was filled, Trixie and Milton climbed aboard and sat next to the pilot. The cloud-shaped machine hummed to life and lifted off from the ground until they were above the tops of the tallest buildings, and then they darted across the sky. Milton turned to the pilot. "How far is it to the Nathair province?" The pilot smiled at Milton.
The Nathair province is located on the eastern coast of the continent, and it would take a week to get there by foot.
Milton's mouth dropped open, but before he could ask any questions, the pilot chuckled and continued.
Not to worry. In Anivo, we should reach it in about 20 minutes.
The sides and bottom of the Enivo were all clear, and Milton looked down to see cities and forests appear and vanish as they spread through. "This is nothing like anything we have where I come from." The pilot laughed.
If you are impressed by this, then you should see the crafts that we use when we want to travel through space. Those make this look like it's standing still.
After a few minutes of travel, the Enivo began to slow down.
I'm going to have to let you out here. If I get any closer to Lane Khan's palace, one of his minions will shoot me down. We've already lost 6 Anivos to them.
Milton frowned. "You can't get us any closer than this? It looks like the palace is all the way on the other side of the city." Sweat appeared on the pilot's forehead.
I've already taken you further than any Anivo has gotten in the past few weeks. I'm afraid you will have to continue on foot from here.
The Enivo lowered to the ground, and the sides opened once more. The Anivos took off once Trixie, Milton, and their volunteers had all gotten out. Milton turned to look at the volunteers, most of whom were standing nervously in anticipation. Syllabo made his way up to Trixie and Milton's side and smiled. "What is the plan from here? I'm sure that everyone would feel more confident if we knew what was coming next." Milton nodded his head. "Thanks for the advice, Syllabo." Milton cleared his throat. "We are about to enter into Lane Khan's territory, so we are likely to run into some of his loyal followers. We are also likely to run into some of the humans that were brought through. I know that they will likely attack us, but you need to just ignore them. They can't hurt you, and they are only there to distract us. No matter what happens, none of you can use magic. Do you understand me? The last thing we need is for any of you to turn to Lane Khan's side unexpected." Trixie frowned.
I don't think we should just ignore the humans that are in the city. I'm sure that none of them want to be here doing what they are. I think we should talk with them and give them a chance to go back through one of the portals, or join with us if they want to.
"That's just going to take up more time that we don't have to waste." Milton sighed. Fine. We can talk with them if we come across them, but we aren't going to go out of our way to seek them out. He turned back to the crowd. Now follow me. Milton jumped off the ground and flew toward the city. Trixie and the rest of the Ayas Avum ran after him. Lost Crit was sorting through the remaining artifacts on his shelves, and he smiled to himself. Even if these artifacts never saw any other use than what they were receiving today, he was glad that he had made them. Crafting normal, everyday objects was fine, but every once in a while, he wanted a challenge. He turned to see to another shelf and jumped when he found King Darduo standing behind him.
Sire, what brings you to the vaults?
Darduo looked over his shoulders as if to make sure no one else was watching him. He said discreetly,
You didn't give away any of the objects that were in the royal vault, did you?
Lost Crit looked offended.
Of course not. You forbade that any of those artifacts ever be used except for with your position. Besides, you were the only one with the key to get inside of it.
The king pulled a key that hung around his neck off and handed it to Lost Crit.
I want you to open the vault and fetch the royal scepter for me.
Lost Crit gasped.
But you call that artifact an abomination. What could you want to use it for?
Darduo's face turned stern.
I was not aware that I needed to explain myself to my subjects when I gave an order. Are you still faithful to your king or not?
Lost Crit sighed.
It will be as you say, sire.
Lost Crit took the key from Darduo, grabbed the side of one of his shelves, and pulled. The wall swung away with the shelf and revealed a door made from a golden metal with intricate symbols carved into it. Lost Crit put the key into the keyhole that was slightly off-center of the door. Once he turned the key, he pulled it out partially and rotated again. Once he had rotated 3/4 of the way around, Lost Crit stopped and pushed the key deeper into the door. A panel on the wall next to the door opened up and revealed a lever. Lost Crit pulled on the lever and another shelf slid open to reveal a small chamber with pedestals arranged inside of it. The king stepped into the chamber and picked the golden scepter up from one of the pedestals. A pained look crossed his face and he sighed.
I have to do my part to end this struggle as well.
Darduo stalked out of the chamber past Lost Crit.
Hang on to that key until I return, and tell no one of what I just did.
Milton searched for threats as he flew through the city. The streets were strangely deserted. From what the pilot had told him, he expected to find Ayas Avum ready to blast him and his companions from the second they stepped foot inside the city, but he hadn't seen anyone yet. He hoped that didn't mean that Lang Khan had already moved his army to attack the king's castle. He saw movement from the corner of his eye, and he flew straight up instinctively. A fireball passed harmlessly beneath him, and he searched for its source. He found a group of 4 Ayas Avum gathered on the street below, and he shot each of them with an arrow. The 4 Ayas Avum were pulled together and struggled to break free of one another. Milton turned and shouted at Trixie and the others. Be careful. The city may seem abandoned, but they are just waiting to ambush us. A wail filled the city, followed by a thud. Milton and Trixie turned to see what appeared to be a tusked whale with the legs of an elephant and a strong, thick tail that ended in what appeared to be a boulder. The creature was backing up and getting ready to charge at a building with cracked walls, and it bellowed out,
No! I won't take cookies when Mommy isn't looking anymore. I'll be good, please!
Trixie looked up at Milton.
That's a child. We have to help him.
Milton growled but nodded his head. We need to get him out of the city. We can't ask a child to help us fight against Lang Khan.
I'll take care of it. I'll take him to the edge of the city and catch back up with you, faster than anyone else could.
Trixie ran up to the child and held up her hands.
Hey, big guy. It's okay. We'll take you home to your mommy.
The child started crying.
But the scary men said if I stopped hitting the buildings, they would hurt my mommy.
Trixie smiled reassuringly at him.
Don't worry. We're going to deal with the scary men, but let's get you out of here for now.
The child nodded and followed Trixie toward the edge of the city. Milton started forward again, and the Ayas Avum charged after him. They continued on deeper into the city toward Lang Khan's castle, and before too long, Trixie zipped up under Milton. She smiled up at him.
He's waiting for us to return where the Aniveau dropped us off. Have you come across any other creatures or Ayas Avum yet?
Milton shook his head. No, and it worries me. This is Lang Khan's city, the province that he controls. You would think he'd have his forces more actively protecting it. Trixie frowned.
You're right. Maybe Ahir was able to thin the ranks enough that Lang Khan only could afford to have them guard the area around the castle. I'll run ahead and check it out.
Trixie darted down the street before Milton could get out. Wait! It might be a trap! Milton growled, but started flying as fast as the gauntlets would let him, hoping he could get to Trixie before anything happened to her. Before Milton made it too far, Trixie appeared back underneath him.
I was right. There are a bunch of Ayas Avum gathered in front of the palace, but I saw a couple of small groups spread out wherever they had some humans attacking the city. I'll take a few Ayas Avum with me to free the humans, and you could take the rest of them with you to attack the castle.
Milton shook his head. We should stick together. Besides, you agreed that we wouldn't go out of our way to seek any humans out. Trixie pouted.
You just want to leave helpless people to suffer? Besides, we wouldn't be sending everyone out to deal with them. Only a few of us.
Milton growled. No, Trixie. We can help them once this is all taken care of. We are going to need your shield with us when we fight against Lang Khan's followers. Trixie crossed her arms.
Fine, but once we free Ahir and get the sword back, we're coming back to help these people.
Milton nodded his head. That's fine. Now lead us to the palace. Trixie raced ahead of the group, and Milton flew after her. He gasped when he saw a giant fireball the width of the city street come flying at them. Trixie stopped running and braced herself for the impact of the fireball. The fireball crashed into their shield, and bounced back down the street, and startled cries came from the front of the palace, followed by a loud crash. Once the smoke cleared away, Milton looked in shock at the large hole in the side of the palace. A smile crossed his face. That's our ticket inside. Arius Avum jumped around the corner in front of the palace, the last to join looking slightly singed and some of them dragging chains that led up to iron collars wrapped around the necks of creatures. 4 of these creatures followed hesitantly after those who held their chains. One that had the body of a tyrannosaurus with the head of a lion and long tentacles in place of its arms. Another of the creatures had a long, scaled body of a dragon, and another looked like a 4-armed bear with wings sprouting from its back. The final creature was a giant wolf that appeared to be made of magma. Smoke rose up from the ground where it stood, and it left behind footprints melted into the stone wherever it walked. One of the Arius Avum pointed his finger at Milton and shouted,
Stop them from entering the palace. They want to interfere with Master Lang Khan's plans.
The Arius Avum gathered in front of the palace, started sending fireballs, chunks of ice, bolts of lightning, and boulders hurtling down the street at Milton and his group of Arius Avum. Milton flew up and drew back his bowstring. This is it! Everyone spread out and try to keep them busy for Trixie and I so we can get into that palace. He released a string and a bolt of light flew into the Arius Avum that had pointed at him, and released a second shot into another Arius Avum holding one of the chains. The first Arius Avum crashed into the other, knocking both of them to the ground. Trixie rushed around, trying to deflect all of the magical attacks back at Lang Khan's followers, but she gasped when she saw that some of the attacks were going to hit the human prisoners. She rushed past the attacks and got between the humans and the magical attacks, and did her best to deflect the attacks into the group of Arius Avum when she could, and the rest of them she deflected into the ground. She shouted to the humans,
Fight with us, and we'll make sure that you make it back home and return to normal.
The transformed humans hesitated momentarily, and then turned upon those holding their chains, swatting them aside. Once the chains were free from the Arius Avum's hands, Trixie started working on freeing them. The dragon regarded Trixie once it was free and said,
I do not wish to fight. I just want to return home.
Trixie smiled.
You don't have to fight. If you follow the street to the outside of the city, you'll find another human that has been transformed. If you wait there with him, we'll take you home once we're finished here. If you want a chance to get revenge on the one responsible for this happening to you, stay with us and fight.
The dragon rushed to leave the town, shoving Arius Avum out of its way, and the bear-like creature followed after it. The other two, though, turned and started attacking more of the Arius Avum loyal to Lang Khan. More and more of the Arius Avum were falling victim to Milton's bow, and were subdued on the ground, but some of the Arius Avum began to break free and were focusing their attacks on Milton, seeing him as the real threat of the fight. Milton darted around the city, avoiding spell after spell, firing off his arrows when he could. He spared glimpses for the rest of the Arius Avum occasionally, and was amazed at what some other artifacts could do. He watched one Arius Avum carrying a silver chain touch the chain to one of Lang Khan's minions. The Arius Avum's hands dropped down to his side, and he struggled against invisible bonds. He watched another wearing a pair of gauntlets push his hand toward Lang Khan's minions and send them flying. Only in a world like this, where the people knew nothing of violence, would objects such as these gather dust on a shelf. He was glad that more of these artifacts hadn't found their way into human hands. Trixie became a blur on the battlefield, racing back and forth, deflecting magic attacks on the Arius Avum and the humans. She made sure to keep an eye on the humans, and made them a priority over the Arius Avum. Several Arius Avum were hit by magical attacks, and their cries of pain weighed upon her, but she knew that they would ultimately be alright. But the same couldn't be said of the humans if they were hit by one of those spells. Milton swooped down next to Trixie and said, We aren't accomplishing anything out here. We need to get inside that palace. Trixie looked around the battlefield with uncertainty.
What about the humans? Without me to protect them, they're sure to be hurt at the very least.
Milton sighed. We can bring them with us, as well as a few of the Arius Avum to support us. Syllable ran up to them. What are the two of you doing? We're in the middle of a battlefield. This is no place for a chat. Milton smiled at Syllabo. Good timing, Syllabo. We are about to go into the palace, so you go ahead and choose a few Arius Avum to go inside with us. No more than 3, other than you. Syllabo turned his head and whistled, and 5 Arius Avum heads turned to look at him. He motioned for them to come over, and they did cautiously. "Ye three are to come with us into the palace, and I'm leaving you two in charge of this fight. Take care of our brothers and sisters, and make sure to keep our foes distracted." Trixie moved over to where the humans were fighting and explained the plan, and the three of them headed for the hole in the side of the palace. Milton and the four Arias Abram rushed after them. Milton flew ahead of the group and quickly searched the room they entered into. He was surprised to see no guards anywhere inside, but motioned for the others to continue on. Once Syllable caught up, he pointed at a staircase along the far wall. "I've been here before to deliver a message from King Dardua, and Len Khan kept his throne on the top floor." The group rushed up the staircase, but no one noticed another Arias Avum